Hey guys, tonight's story starts with frozen toes, a shift bell that sounds like regret, and a blanket that's more theory than fabric. You've been stationed on the North Tower, a spot generously described as less drafty by a captain who hasn't been up here since midsummer. The torch flickers like it owes someone money. Your breath is visible, and the wind keeps asking intrusive questions through the cracks in the stone. You try to sleep sitting up, wrapped in a cloak that smells like boiled wool and poor choices, and you wonder not for the first time if the enemy could just wait until spring. But before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wake up with your face pressed against something that feels suspiciously like damp stone. Your neck at an angle, your spine is already filing a complaint about, and your breath visible in the air like it's trying to escape without you. Someone's elbow is in your ribs, another person's foot is tangled in your cloak, and the unmistakable smell of boiled cabbage haunts the air like a ghost with boundary issues. You are cold, profoundly, spiritually cold. The kind of cold that creeps under your skin and sets up a permanent residence in your bones. You try to move, but the bearskin wrapped around your legs protests with a wet squelch and a noise that sounds like a very sad sigh. You pause, frown, and look down. This is not your bearskin. You don't own a bearskin. You're not even sure who does. It smells like old ale, smoked fish, and faintly of wet dog, which narrows it down to approximately everyone in this corridor. You consider removing it, but then the wind howls through a gap in the stone wall and licks across your ankles like a malicious spirit, and you decide the bear, and you will have to learn to get along. Around you, other guards stir in the semi-darkness. One man mutters something about pickles in his sleep. Another scratches himself with the violent energy of a man in battle. A third sits bolt upright and shouts, "Halt!" before blinking rapidly and muttering an apology to a nearby broom. The night shift has ended, and morning, or what passes for it in a stone room with a single window the size of a large rat, has begun. You sit up slowly. Everything cracks. Your knees sound like distant thunder. Your back feels like it's auditioning for the role of ancient creaking bridge. You blink at the single candle stub still burning on the ledge, its light flickering in protest, like even it is tired of trying. Your nose itches. You scratch it with a hand that is either your own or frozen into the shape of someone else's. Someone nearby groans. Whose idea was it to sleep in shifts? A voice grumbles from the shadows. It might be Oleg, or a barrel, hard to tell at this hour. Yours, another voice says. Definitely Rook, the short one with the suspicious bread. You said we'd rotate warmth. You glance around. No one looks particularly warm. Balfrey, who always sleeps closest to the wall, is currently curled around a mostly empty sack of turnips and mumbling something about vengeance. A rat runs across the floor, pauses near your boot like it's considering a chat, then thinks better of it. You finally stand, which feels like an act of rebellion against your own joints. The stone floor is aggressively cold, like it holds a personal grudge. You wobble toward the tiny hearth in the corner, where 3 coals glow like tired memories. You crouch beside them, hold out your hands, and whisper encouragement. The fire does not respond. Anyone seen the flint? You ask. There is a rustling from under a blanket, followed by a grunt, and the sound of someone accidentally kicking a helmet. A small metal clatter echoes through the room like a badly tuned bell. No one produces the flint. You consider going outside to check if the sun has done anything useful yet, but the last time you did that before breakfast, Your eyelashes froze together, and a pigeon tried to roost on your head. Instead, you poke the coals with a stick you found in someone's boot last night and pretend this is helping. Someone sneezes behind you. A wet, dramatic sneeze that sounds like it belongs in a tale of epic tragedy. "Bless you," you mutter. "Don't waste the blessings," the sneezer croaks. "Save them for the soup." You pull the bearskin tighter around your shoulders. It's damp now, possibly from your own breath, possibly from the memory of the bear it used to belong to. Either way, it's yours now. In this moment, it is the only line between you and whatever Arctic punishment the castle is dishing out this morning. A bell rings somewhere deep in the keep. Breakfast, or maybe roll call, or maybe just some noble dropping their chamber pot again. No one moves quickly. The room smells like sweat, mildew, and hope's last gasp. You rub your face, stretch your arms, and prepare to face the day. You are a guard. You are cold, and you are very much awake. Your bed is not so much a bed as it is a concept. The straw is scattered with all the commitment of a drunk farmer, and the flat rock that serves as your pillow has a sharp edge, positioned exactly where your temple usually rests. You shift slightly, trying to adjust the contours of your skull to match the geography of the stone, and succeed only in waking whatever spider colony lives beneath it. One of them scurries out from under the straw like it's late for something important. You wish it luck. The blanket, if one can call a loosely woven fabric square that smells like stewed onions, and the kind of sweat that clings to memories, offers very little comfort. It crackles when you move it, either from old hay trapped inside or possibly frost. You try to pull it higher over your shoulders, but it stops at your chest, having apparently reached the limits of its ambitions. You remember a rumor about an extra cloak hidden behind the armory door, but it's probably just that, a rumor. Like hot baths or justice. You sit up, slowly, stiffly, as if your joints are made of old cheese and reluctant promises. The room is dim, lit only by the faint morning light leaking through the window. Slits like it too isn't entirely convinced about being here. You glance around the barracks. Most of the other guards are still asleep or doing a passable impression of it. Balfrey is snoring directly into a sack of grain, and someone near the far wall has cocooned themselves in a tarp that once covered the firewood. Smart, possibly illegal. A mouse skitters across the floor, pauses, sniffs the air, then darts under someone's boot. The person doesn't flinch. Either they're deeply asleep, or they've accepted the mice as part of the local hospitality. You've started to feel the same way. There's a sort of mutual understanding. You don't bother the mice. They don't steal your last crust of bread unless it's important. Your lower back itches in a way that suggests straw is not a naturally skin-friendly material. You pick a shard out of your tunic and stare at it. It's slightly damp. You decide not to wonder why. There are questions that only invite suffering. Standing is harder than it should be. You rise like a very old tree in a very bad storm, every part of you creaking and protesting as though this might be your final act. Your legs feel numb, but it's the sort of numbness that hums with cold rather than peace. The stone floor greets your feet with all the warmth of a tax collector. You shuffle toward the corner where someone left a dented jug of water last night. It's half frozen now. You try to drink from it, but your lips stick to the rim. You consider your options and decide to pretend it didn't happen. The room smells like socks, boiled roots, and desperation. The fire in the hearth is just a memory, a few gray embers clinging to life like gossip in a small town. You kneel beside it and blow gently. One ember glows in response, briefly, then fades back into ash. You tell yourself you tried. Behind you, someone coughs in a way that suggests either illness or poor dramatic timing. You don't turn around. You don't want to be assigned their shift if they keel over. That's how you got into this mess last time someone sneezed in the chapel, and now you're sleeping on rocks with a blanket that may actually be a table runner. You return to your bed. You stare at it. You lie down again, because standing doesn't seem to be helping anyone. The straw pokes into your spine with renewed enthusiasm. The rock beneath your head has gotten colder, somehow. The blanket has curled at the edges like it's trying to escape. You stare at the ceiling, which is mostly stone and spider webs, and the faint outline of what might be a saint or a poorly planned leak. You try to sleep a little longer. You try not to think about the fact that you'll be back on the outer wall in 2 hours. You try not to count the number of nights you've slept like this. You succeed at none of these things. But for a moment, you are still. The straw shifts slightly under your weight. The mice settle back into their corners. Somewhere, someone snores with conviction, and you lie there, wrapped in onions and obligation, wondering how much colder it can get before you stop noticing. You don't remember volunteering. In fact, you're fairly certain you were mid-bite into a turnip when the captain pointed at you and said, "That one looks sturdy." You tried to argue, but with your mouth full and your face doing its usual uncooperative things, the most you managed was a slightly confused thumbs up. It was taken as acceptance, agreement, eagerness, even. And now here you are standing on the outer wall, alone, wrapped in layers that barely qualify as clothing, and holding a torch that spits in your direction every time the wind changes. Which is often. The torch doesn't like you. It makes this sharp, wet hiss every few seconds, like it knows you're not the sort of person who was meant to carry fire. It leans away from you when you walk and flares dramatically whenever you try to warm your hands. It is, by all appearances, a diva. You contemplate blowing it out just to assert dominance, but then the breeze picks up again and your fingers feel like they're being individually punished. You cling to the handle like it owes you money. The wall beneath your feet is slick with frost. Not fresh snow, no, that would be picturesque. This is spite frost, invisible, slanted, waiting for your confidence to rise just enough before it sends you skidding into a bucket of salted meat or off the battlements entirely. You move slowly, cautiously, like a very old dog on a frozen pond. Somewhere to your left, a raven lets out a noise that sounds suspiciously like laughter. You don't trust it. You try to focus on your job. Look out, stay alert, watch the horizon for movement. But mostly, you find yourself watching your own breath. It curls in front of your face like a ghost trying to tell you something urgent and depressing. Your eyes water, partly from the cold and partly from the torch smoke, which insists on following you no matter which direction you turn. You turn a lot. They said the outer wall was a position of honor. They also said that about peeling root vegetables in the cellar, so you're starting to suspect that phrase doesn't mean what you thought it did. What it actually means is farthest from the fire. What it means is you're the first to see death coming and the last to be thanked. What it means is no one's bringing you stew. You pace a little to keep your legs from freezing. The wind finds new ways to sneak under your cloak with every step. You've tucked your tunic into your breeches into your socks, and your socks into a philosophical debate about why humans insisted on settling anywhere colder than a bakery. Still, the chill gets in. It always does. At one point, you try humming to distract yourself. It echoes off the stone, like it's embarrassed for you. You switch to muttering insults at the torch, which seems to thrive on the attention. It flickers with a sort of smugness that's hard to define but deeply felt. You wonder briefly what sturdy actually means. Is it the width of your shoulders? The lack of visible shivering? That time you carried 2 barrels without groaning? You make a mental note to groan more often. Look fragile. Develop a cough. Time moves strangely on the wall. You check the stars, the moon, the position of a particularly stubborn stain on your sleeve, but none of it tells you how long you've been out here. Your nose has gone numb. Your cheeks feel like they've been slapped by winter itself, and your toes have stopped sending reports entirely. You hop a little on the spot and pretend it's for tactical reasons. Eventually, footsteps echo behind you. A younger guard, pink-cheeked and holding a bowl of something vaguely steaming, walks by on his way to the inner post. He gives you a sympathetic glance. You nod at him, the universal signal for, "We suffer nobly." He nods back, the universal signal for, "I'll be warm soon," and you won't. You return your gaze to the dark beyond the walls, to the trees that move in slow waves like they're whispering secrets to each other. You grip the torch tighter. It growls. You may not know much. You may not be warm, but you are sturdy. And apparently, that's enough. The first hour of your shift passes in a haze of involuntary shivering and muttered curses that freeze in the air before they can reach heaven. You lean against the wall, not for support, but for something solid to resent. The stones are slick with ice. The torch sputters in and out of consciousness like it's having second thoughts, and your cloak has begun a slow betrayal, inching away from your shoulders like it too wants a transfer. You shift your weight from one foot to the other in an attempt to stay warm, but it just alternates the numbness between legs, like a particularly bleak relay race. Your boots, generously described by the quartermaster as weathered, have developed the texture and insulation of thinly sliced cheese. You stopped feeling your toes somewhere between the third sigh and the fourth poorly executed jumping jack. You poke your foot against the stone to see if it still exists. The result is inconclusive. The wind, sensing your vulnerability, grows bolder. It threads itself through your sleeves, snakes down your collar, and whistles directly into your ear like it's trying to share gossip about your shortcomings. You hunch your shoulders and tug your hood down further, but it's like arguing with a glacier. In the distance, nothing moves. No armies, no torches, no flicker of hostile intent. Just the occasional cry of a night bird who sounds equally disillusioned with its career. You start fantasizing not about food or fire, but about being captured by an enemy force that generously issues woolen layers and lets you sleep indoors, maybe even beds with mattresses. Not feathers, of course. That would be too much. Just a pile of hay that doesn't smell like fermented onion. You pace along the wall, dragging your feet in small arcs like a man carving out his final will with heel prints. The other guard, stationed near the west turret, is nowhere to be seen. You think he's still patrolling the interior, which is code for sitting behind a barrel near the kitchen vent, absorbing steam like a morally flexible sponge. You'd report him, but you'd do the same if you could fit in the space. A shape moves below. You squint, heart racing, gripping your torch like it might suddenly turn useful. But it's just a pig, or possibly a dog with self-esteem issues. It snuffles around the courtyard, scratches itself, and disappears into the shadows like it has somewhere better to be. You try not to take it personally. Your torch sputters again and goes out entirely this time, plunging you into a deeper shade of darkness that feels almost theatrical. You relight it with trembling fingers and a flint you keep tucked in your belt for exactly this sort of moment. The flame coughs back to life and immediately blows smoke into your face. You cough back, less successfully. You try thinking warm thoughts, fireside songs, bread fresh from the oven, a bath so hot it makes you forget your name. But the cold interrupts every fantasy like an angry landlord, demanding payment in chattering teeth and frozen eyelashes. Your hands are stiff. Your nose is leaking. You consider stuffing hay into your sleeves, but decide that might lower morale, mostly your own. The stars above are bright and uncaring. They twinkle like they know something you don't. You try talking to one, just a quiet hello. It doesn't answer, which is fair, but still rude. A door creaks somewhere behind you. Hope flares briefly, maybe a shift change, maybe a hot drink, but it's just the wind again, prying at hinges with bony fingers. You slump further into your cloak and blow on your hands, which has all the effectiveness of whispering encouragement to an icicle. You hear footsteps your own, echoing back at you, and you wonder if this wall has ever been warm. If maybe, 100 years ago, someone else stood in this very spot and thought the same thing. You hope they had better boots. Time passes slowly. the kind of slow that rearranges your sense of self. You are not a man, not a woman, not a person anymore. You are a collection of complaints wrapped in wool, balancing a torch with the energy of a damp broom. And still, the enemy doesn't come, which, frankly, feels a little rude. You're pretty sure cloaks are supposed to cover shoulders, maybe wrap around the torso, offer at least the illusion of warmth. Yours, however, hangs from your neck like a passive-aggressive dish towel fluttering behind you in the wind with all the gravitas of a disappointed dinner napkin. It barely drapes past your elbow. If you stretch it across both arms, you look like a poorly dressed bat. If you pull it down over your back, your front is exposed to the elements like an open letter to frostbite. You try not to cry, not because it's unmanly, but because the tears would freeze to your face. The fabric is thin, fraying at the edges, and smells faintly but persistently of turnip stew. Not fresh stew, either. This is the scent of a pot that has lived too long. There's a patch in the middle, stitched with red thread in the shape of what might be a lion, or possibly a chicken with self-confidence. You didn't get to choose it. The quartermaster just shoved it at you with a grunt and something that may have been a wink, though it's possible he just had soup in his eye. You try to make it work. You fold the cloak in half. You wrap it around your shoulders like a shawl. You wear it backwards for 10 minutes, pretending it's a new fashion trend from the southern provinces. Nothing helps. The wind gets in no matter what you do, laughing as it passes through the thin weave like it's on holiday and your ribs are the main attraction. Your fellow guards take turns not noticing. One of them, Rook, glances at your cloak and quickly looks away, the way people look at paintings of sad clowns. You consider asking for a different one, but that requires going back inside, and the only thing colder than this wall is the expression the captain gives when people complain about supplies. Last time someone asked for new boots, they were handed a set of wooden clogs and a reminder that grit builds character. That man now works in the stables and no longer makes eye contact. You tug the cloak tighter. It responds by unraveling slightly near the hem, revealing a faded emblem that might once have been a family crest. There are initials embroidered into the corner, G.T., which almost certainly stands for good tablecloth or given temporarily. You wonder briefly who G.T. was and whether they died from exposure or fashion-related embarrassment. You pass another guard on your patrol. He's wearing a proper cloak, thick wool, fur-lined, fastened with a gleaming brooch in the shape of a stag. He gives you a polite nod. You respond by adjusting your sad little tapestry with the dignity of someone who knows they're losing a competition they didn't know they were in. The wind, naturally, chooses this moment to yank it sideways, slapping you in the face with the smell of old broth and possibly onions. You sigh and keep walking. The wall is long and uneventful, the torches flickering like tired actors in a play no one wants to watch. Your fingers are numb, your ears ache. The cloak does nothing. It's not even heavy enough to be comforting. It flaps with each gust, tugging you backwards, as if trying to escape your life choices on its own. At one point, you stop and hold the thing out in front of you, just to look at it properly. You turn it over, examine the seams, squint at the stains. There's a gravy blotch near the top, a few breadcrumbs in the fold. Someone absolutely used this at a feast before it became part of your uniform. You shake it out in frustration, and a small spoon falls from one of the inner folds. You stare at it for a long moment, then tuck it into your belt. You never know. There's a noise behind you, just the creak of the gate, or maybe a distant owl mocking you, and you spin too quickly. The cloak catches the wind again, lifting like a sail, and nearly yanks you off your feet. You wrestle it back down with the patience of someone trying to diaper an angry goose, then pull it tight and hold it there with one hand on your chest, as if pretending it belongs to you will make it true. You continue your watch. You are cold, underdressed, and possibly draped in someone's old holiday linens, but you are still, technically, a guard. And the wall, for now, is still standing. You're not trying to fall asleep. Not really. It's more of an accidental drift, a sideways slide into unconsciousness like a drunk uncle easing into a family reunion chair. Your eyes are still open, technically, and your body remains upright, but your soul is somewhere else entirely, probably in a stew pot, gently simmering with leaks and moral ambiguity. It begins with the wall. Cold, damp, unmoving. A romantic partner, if you lower your standards enough. You angle your shoulder just so, find a spot that feels slightly less jagged than the rest, and settle in. One boot wedged against a loose stone for traction, the other bracing your weight in case gravity remembers you exist. Your spine hums a little protest, but you shush it like a lullaby. This isn't about comfort. This is about survival. Your eyes blur. The stars overhead smear into something vaguely poetic, and for a moment you imagine you're a traveling bard with a tragic past and a lute you don't know how to play. The torch sputters near your hip, casting twitchy shadows that vaguely resemble rats having a meeting. You're too tired to be alarmed. Sleep doesn't come all at once. It sneaks up on you. First your thoughts grow sluggish, then your knees start to lock. You lean further into the wall like it's been promoted to structural support for your entire existence. You become a vertical blanket burrito with a heartbeat and very low standards. One eye stays open. That's the rule. You learned it from older guards, the ones missing fingers but never sarcasm. Half a watch is better than no watch, they'd say while pouring something foul into tin cups. So you squint with your left eye. Let the right wander off into the dreamscape where your bed is warm and nobody makes you stand outside to guard against theoretical invaders and actual wind. You dream of stew, not just any stew, the kind with real meat and things that crunch in a good way. Onions, sure, but also herbs and that mysterious red root they never name. You're holding a spoon the size of your face and no one is judging you. Someone plays a lute. You forgive them. Then a noise brings you back. Not loud, just a distant clank, like a bucket falling over or a ghost politely coughing. Your open eye focuses, sort of. It's hard to tell if anything's moved. The torch crackles in a way that sounds judgmental. You adjust your stance, pretend you were stretching, and stare into the darkness like it owes you rent. Your neck is stiff. Your knees have begun filing complaints. You shift positions, leaning the other shoulder against the wall, and discover a new level of discomfort previously thought impossible. The stone here is colder, wetter, and somehow angrier. You accept it. Your standards, much like your circulation, are at an all-time low. You hear snoring. It's not yours. You glance down and realize the smaller guard, Edwin, maybe, has nestled into a sitting position by the archway, his head tucked into his cloak like a turtle with a bedtime. He looks peaceful. You feel a little betrayed, but also jealous. So jealous. You try not to close both eyes at once, but the air is still. The world is quiet, and the line between vigilance and exhaustion gets blurrier with each exhale. You let your chin dip forward, just for a second, just to rest your jaw, and suddenly you're back in the dream. The stew, again. Someone hands you a slice of bread the size of a shield. You're weeping, then your head jerks up. Your neck makes a sound like an old drawer. You blink, realign your spine, pretend everything's fine. The wall remains stoic. It neither mocks nor comforts. It simply exists, the perfect partner in this grim ballet of half sleep and full shivering. You're not asleep, but you're not awake either. You've found the middle place, where dreams have drafty windows and time stops bothering to pass. You are one with the wall. And somehow, that's enough. You hear about it casually. A throwaway comment muttered by a senior guard as he gnaws on a chunk of bread that looks like it fought back. "Gotta get back to the fire room before me boots harden again," he says between chews, as if he's not detonating your worldview in a single sentence. You pause mid-step, torch flickering in your grip, and try to process what you've just heard. Fire, room, together. A room that contains fire, not just for cooking, not in the vague, useless way of a torch affixed to a damp wall, but actual, sustained, defiant warmth. Your ears ring, your fingers twitch. You stare at the back of the man's head as he disappears around a corner, trailing breadcrumbs and oblivion. You want to grab him, shake him, ask if the room is real or just a fever dream whispered to new recruits as a cruel initiation. But you don't. Not yet. Hope, you've learned, is a fragile thing easily spooked by too many questions. Instead, you stew. Not literally, unfortunately. You spend the next hour walking your assigned section of the wall with all the enthusiasm of a man who has just learned heaven might be 2 corridors away. The cold bites deeper now, made sharper by your newly acquired knowledge. You imagine the fire room constantly, glowing embers, a hearth wide enough to roast regrets, guards, sitting nearby in a loose circle of blissful survival. You picture chairs, actual chairs with backs and maybe even cushions, though now you're probably getting ahead of yourself. Maybe one of them even has stew. You begin to hate them just a little. The other guards don't mention it. You drop subtle hints. Sure is cold out here. Wish there were a warm place for guards to rest between shifts. Nothing. Not even a twitch. One guy coughs so hard he nearly topples over, but that's more of a lung issue than a conversational breakthrough. You try again with, ever heard of a room with, a fire? The silence that follows is so complete it feels curated. One of them actually whistles, which you're fairly certain is the medieval equivalent of changing the subject. This only makes it worse. Now it's not just a hope. It's a conspiracy. A secret known only to those with seniority or a full set of teeth. You imagine a hidden door, maybe behind the pantry, guarded by a man named Ulrich, who only lets you in if you solve a riddle or bring him a warm pie. Or maybe there's no door at all. Maybe the fire room appears only to those who have truly suffered, like some kind of heat-based ghost. You think you catch a glimpse of it once, down a narrow hallway, through a crack in a heavy wooden door. There's a faint orange flicker. Your breath catches. You step toward it, heart hammering against your ribs like it's trying to escape and find a fire of its own. But then someone calls your name sharply, urgently, and by the time you glance back, the door is closed. The hallway is empty. You spend the next 15 minutes pretending to adjust your boot just to stay in the area, hoping the warmth will leak through the stone like kindness. It doesn't. By the time your shift ends, you're consumed. You trudge back to the barracks, every step an icy insult, cloak wrapped around you like a desperate lie. You lie down on your pile of straw and onions, eyes open, staring at the ceiling as your bunkmate snores through his nose like a broken bellows. You're cold, tired, and increasingly convinced that the fire room is the last real thing left in the world. You whisper the words to yourself like a prayer. Fire room, and though you have no proof it exists, you fall asleep dreaming of it anyway, because sometimes hope is warmer than wool. You stumble into the guard tower like a man who's lost a fight with both the wind and the concept of self-respect. The stairs creak with the same exhausted rhythm as your knees, and your breath leaves a faint trail behind you, like even your lungs are trying to escape. The room at the top isn't so much a chamber as it is a glorified storage closet with illusions of grandeur. There's no fire, no stew, no whispered laughter of guards enjoying warmth, and the simple pleasure of not being outside. There is, however, a pile of something vaguely person-shaped in the corner. You head toward it without thinking. That's where your brain is now, somewhere south of logic, deep in the swampy recesses of survival instinct and the desire to stop shivering long enough to remember your own name. You lower yourself carefully, joints popping in protest, and lean into the heap like it's a long-lost friend. The surface is cold, but not cruel, firm, but yielding. There's a slope just right for a shoulder, and the faintest suggestion of body heat, or maybe just your own reflected off the nearest breastplate. You sigh, not out of contentment, no. You left contentment behind 2 cloaks ago, but out of a tired kind of surrender. Your cheek rests against something smooth and metallic. You don't care. You close your eyes. 10 minutes later, your thoughts drift toward warmth. Not real warmth, but the imagined kind. A flickering hearth, a thick blanket, a room that doesn't constantly whisper threats through the cracks in the walls. You nuzzle in slightly. Something shifts. A buckle presses into your cheek. Still, you stay. The cold doesn't reach as sharply here. The wind is a rumor now, hushed by the stone walls and your own exhaustion. Eventually, something thunks loose beside you. You half open an eye and catch sight of a helmet rolling gently across the floor. Not a guard's head, just the helmet. You blink, slowly. Then you follow the line of your arm, the one you've slung possessively over what you were quite sure was a fellow human being, and realize you are, in fact, cuddling a full suit of armor. No occupant, just hollow, dented steel, and the faint smell of old oil and shame. You consider moving. You really do. But your body has staged a quiet rebellion, forming a mutiny alliance with the stone floor and your questionable choices. Your fingers stay hooked under a breastplate strap. Your leg remains tangled with a greave. You're not proud, but you are warmish, and that counts for something. In the dim light, the armor glints like it knows. It doesn't mock you, not openly, but it hums with the quiet knowledge of every desperate guard who's come before. The ones who, like you, mistook it for comfort, for companionship, for anything other than what it is, a silent witness to how far you've fallen. There are voices downstairs, someone coming up. You don't move. If they see you, you'll say you were inspecting it, testing the integrity of its joints, practicing close quarters combat with an unarmed opponent. You'll say anything that doesn't sound like, I was spooning a breastplate because it radiated less disappointment than my life. The steps fade away again. You breathe out slowly, nose brushing against a dent that might have once saved someone's life. Or maybe someone dropped it down the stairs. You don't know. You don't ask. It's not that kind of relationship. Eventually, you drift off. Not deep sleep, but the half-sleep of someone braced for ridicule. You dream of a ballroom filled with armor sets, all dancing gracefully, each one with a sleepy guard clinging to their back. The music is distant and muffled, like it's being played on the other side of a door that's just slightly ajar. You sway in time, cheek pressed to cool steel, and for the first time all night, you're not cold. It's not romantic. It's not even sad. It's just survival. And right now, that's enough. No one tells you about the blanket lottery until it's too late. It's not written down anywhere, not carved into the stone rules of the guardhouse or etched into the memory of your poor, frost-bitten soul. It's just something everyone seems to know, something passed along in meaningful glances and quiet nods, and the occasional grunted, "Tough luck, new guy." By the time you stumble into the barracks at the end of your shift, cloak limp with dew and dignity fraying at the edges, the game has already begun. There's a barrel in the corner. Wooden, crooked, filled with what one might generously call blankets, though they bear a closer resemblance to tapestry scraps and horse grooming cloths. The guards gather around it like peasants around a rumor. One by one, they reach in, pull out their fate, and hold it up for brief inspection before skulking off to their straw pallets. A thick wool one goes first, then a sheepskin with only mild stains. A third guard pulls out a woven monstrosity that smells like fish but looks warm, so no one judges him. You hang back, watching, unsure if you're even allowed to participate. Then someone waves a hand at you. "Get in there before the lice do," he says, chuckling at his own joke, which you suspect might not be a joke. You approach the barrel like it might bite. By the time your hand reaches the bottom, the only thing left is a damp, fraying rectangle of fabric that could generously be called textile adjacent. You lift it out slowly. It's brownish, or gray, or maybe both. It smells of defeat, with subtle notes of wet fur and turnip cellar. You unfold it and discover it doesn't unfold. This is its full size. It's roughly the dimensions of a dinner napkin. If the dinner had gone badly and everyone left early, someone claps you on the back. Ah, the noble half blanket, they say. A classic. You don't respond. You are busy calculating how to drape it in such a way that it covers something important, your chest, maybe, or your sense of betrayal. You opt for the chest, assuming it's where your soul used to be, before the cold took it. You trudge toward your corner of the barracks and collapse onto your straw bed, which has been rearranged slightly in your absence. Someone has taken your favorite flat rock and replaced it with a lump of wood. You lie down anyway. The half blanket barely covers you from shoulder to mid-rib. You consider folding it in half for extra thickness, but then it only reaches your collarbone. You experiment for a while, wrapping it diagonally like a makeshift toga, until you resemble a confused druid who lost a bet. Eventually, you give up and tuck it under your chin, hoping your body heat will multiply through sheer optimism. Across the room, another guard is already snoring under what looks like an actual quilt. You hate him quietly, then loudly in your head. You wonder how long you'll have to survive before your lottery odds improve. A month? A year? A frostbitten toe later? You try to sleep. The cold finds its way through every crack, every seam, every ounce of your optimism. Your knees knock together like they're trading secrets. Your feet curl under you in protest. You clutch the half blanket tighter, willing it to become more. It doesn't. Somewhere near your head, a rat sneezes. You think about how warm rats must be, all that compact fury and constant motion. You briefly consider inviting one under the blanket. Then you remember the training lecture on disease and bite force. You sigh and settle for solitude. In the darkness, someone coughs, someone farts. The night is a symphony of discomfort and shared suffering. You close your eyes and pretend you're somewhere else, anywhere else. The fire room, perhaps. A distant tavern. A better timeline where you pulled third instead of last. Eventually, you drift off, half covered, half frozen, and entirely convinced that tomorrow, if the gods are kind or distracted, you might pull a whole blanket. Maybe. There comes a point when you stop dressing for dignity and start dressing like the laundry pile fought back. That point arrives precisely 2 hours before dawn, when your nose becomes a small, cold betrayal in the center of your face and your fingertips stop reporting back with any reliability. You peel yourself out of bed, if bed still counts when it's more straw than structure, and begin the sacred rite of layer acquisition. You start with your standard tunic, which is less of a garment and more of a thin suggestion. It clings to you like a depressed rag and smells vaguely of barley and defeat. Over that, the jerkin. It's stiff in places it shouldn't be, and soft in places that suggest mice may have gotten to it first, but it holds body heat with the weary resignation of something that's been through worse winters than you have. Then the cloak. You're still convinced it was once a decorative curtain, possibly from the pantry, but it adds a whisper of warmth and smells only mildly of soup now, which is an improvement. Then come the extras. The spare tunic you found under your bunk owner unclear, possibly long dead. The overly ambitious scarf someone abandoned on the battlements that you've adopted like a lost pet. The pair of socks that are definitely mittens but you've stopped asking questions. A belt goes over all of it, not for fashion but because otherwise the bulk shifts when you walk and you end up waddling like a burlap goose. By the end, you resemble a child who dressed themselves in secret to avoid going to school. You can barely bend your arms. Turning your head is a diplomatic negotiation. Your legs move in short, precise shuffles like a monk with something to hide. But you're not freezing. Not truly. Not all the way through. You can still feel your spine. Your knees tingle, which means they're still alive. Your ears, wrapped in layers of wool and desperation, are no longer stinging with every gust. For the first time since arriving at this drafty stone apology of a fortress, you feel something close to comfort. It's fleeting, of course. Nothing in castle life is designed to be enjoyed for long. As you make your way to the morning roll call, waddling down the hall like a disgraced bishop, you catch a few sideways glances. One man raises an eyebrow, another whistles. Someone mutters something about a walking tapestry, but you barely hear it over the sound of fabric rustling like dry leaves. You don't care. You're warm. Not summer's day with a cider in hand warm, but my internal organs aren't actively plotting against me. Warm, which, under the circumstances, feels luxurious. You take your place in the line of guards, shoulders high, chin hidden somewhere beneath layer 5. The captain walks past without comment, though his eyes pause on you a beat too long. You imagine he's considering adding a 4th layer requirement to the standard uniform, or he's wondering if you've stolen from the laundry line. Either way, you stand tall, or rather, as tall as someone can while wrapped in 17 pounds of medieval insulation. When the wind kicks up on the wall that evening, you're ready. The others brace, cursing softly into their cloaks, while you merely adjust your scarf and breathe through 3 layers of wool. You smile, not big, not proud, just a small twitch at the corner of your mouth that says, I have solved one tiny piece of this stone puzzle. Later, back in the barracks, you remove the layers one by one, like a sad, itchy nesting doll. Each peel releases a puff of dust, a new scent, a slightly darker shade of regret, but the core of you stays warm. There's something comforting in that, something almost triumphant. You lie down beneath your half blanket, still dressed in at least 2 tunics for insurance, and close your eyes. Lukewarm never felt so good. There's a moment just before your brain fully accepts the reality of frost forming inside your boots when something snaps. Not a loud snap, not dramatic, more of a soft, exhausted click. The sound of a person quietly deciding that if warmth will not come to them, they will commit several petty crimes to summon it. That's when the fire plan begins. You start with what you have: bad intentions and access to the kitchen waste bin. The bin itself is a marvel of medieval innovation. Layers of damp vegetable skins, burnt ends of bread, and something that may have once been a fish, now unrecognizable and developing opinions of its own. You approach it like a raccoon with a philosophy degree, rifling through for anything vaguely flammable. Onion skins, a cracked wooden spoon, half a broom head. You even find a sad, stubby candle that has clearly lost its will to illuminate. Perfect. Then comes the issue of kindling. Turns out, most of what's available in a stone fortress during a damp winter could best be described as resistant to flame, or actively moist. You try scraping some bark from a firewood log, but it turns to mush. You try tearing up the bottom of your cot, but someone's already done that. Desperation takes you to the scribe's room, where a stack of rejected parchments sits near the door, marked, "Do not burn." You burn them. You don't ask what they were. You don't want to know if you've just torched a royal decree or the last surviving copy of the Ballad of Mildly Impressive Victories. You tell yourself it's probably just poetry about geese. You whisper, "Sorry," as you crumple the driest one and tuck it under your pile of stolen scraps. Your fireplace, if it can be called that, is an abandoned brazier near the stables. It's basically a metal bucket with ambition. You arrange your loot inside with the care of a man building a shrine to heat. You strike a flint borrowed borrowed forever from the armory, and spark after spark leaps into the darkness with theatrical flair and zero usefulness. Finally, after 36 failed attempts and one very loud sneeze from inhaled onion dust, the fire catches. For 4 minutes, you are a god. It's not a fire so much as a determined smolder. The parchment flares up in a glorious whoosh that briefly lights your face like a holy relic has just accepted you as its chosen one. The onion skins curl and hiss. The wooden spoon blackens with dignity. You hold your hands close, nearly crying from the heat, from the triumph, from the sudden realization that warmth has a sound, a tiny crackling murmur of, "You did it." Then the candle tips. It falls sideways into the edge of the fish thing, which spits some kind of fluid that you are morally certain should not be flammable, and yet somehow is. There's a sizzle, a puff of smoke, a smell that could legally be classified as a weapon in 4 kingdoms, and then nothing. The fire dies with the theatrical flourish of a noble sacrificing himself in a play. Dramatic, unexpected, definitely louder than necessary. You stare at the ashes, hands still outstretched, as if the warmth might linger out of pity. It does not. Cold air rushes back into the vacuum like a bitter ex reclaiming their half of the bed. You consider trying again, but the scribe's room is now locked, the candles fully spent, and the fish has begun to bubble on its own, and that feels like a bad omen. So you sit for a while beside your extinguished shrine, fingers curled into your sleeves, heart slightly fuller for the attempt. It was 4 minutes of magic, of almost comfort, of illegal warmth, and you do it again. Sleep like a soldier, they say, like it's a universally understood instruction. Like soldiers have some innate, sacred method of unconsciousness that involves dignity, discipline, and a pine-scented dreamscape where no one snores and the straw is evenly distributed. They don't elaborate, just bark it in passing as though it's obvious, as though generations of hardened warriors have passed down bedtime techniques alongside sword forms and soup rotation duty. So you try. You lie flat, arms at your sides, legs straight, eyes closed with intent, not hope, like a noble corpse. If corpses had questionable digestion and an itchy rash behind one knee from wearing 3 layers too many. You breathe deeply, evenly, letting the sounds of the barracks wash over you, muffled groans, someone muttering in their sleep about turnips, and the rhythmic thunk of whatever the guard in the corner is doing with his armor. You do not ask. That path leads nowhere good. You focus on the posture. Maybe it's posture. You tighten your core, lift your chin slightly, and try to align your spine like a particularly determined fence post. The result is a kind of stiffness that suggests you're auditioning for the role of least comfortable person in medieval Europe. Your arms fall asleep before you do. Your neck makes a noise it shouldn't, and you're pretty sure your left foot is plotting an insurrection. Still, you persist. Then you try silence. Not just outer silence, inner silence. The kind monks pretend to have before they sneak off to brew questionable ale in a cellar. You attempt to quiet your thoughts, which unfortunately have gathered in a small, angry council to discuss the fact that your blanket smells like wet goat and your toes haven't spoken to you in hours. You remember a song from your childhood about a dancing hedgehog. You wonder what happened to the hedgehog. You wonder if hedgehogs get cold. You wonder if hedgehogs sleep like soldiers. You turn over, and then over again. Now you're curled slightly, fetal and semi-ashamed, clinging to the remaining warmth in your knees. You adjust the straw beneath you, which behaves like a malicious spirit determined to rearrange itself in the exact shape of your spine's worst enemy. A particularly large lump under your shoulder blade begins to feel personal. You name it Gregory. You tell Gregory you hate him. Eventually, you settle into something not quite restful, but stable. A liminal state. Half dream, half pain, all wrapped in wool, and the distant hope that no one yells at you before dawn. You dream that you're sleeping in a meadow, soft grass beneath you, sun warming your face. Then you wake up to the feel of someone else's foot on your elbow and a sudden breeze through the crack in the wall that smells like cabbage in winter. The illusion shatters. You sit up, blinking in the pre-dawn gloom, and assess yourself. You feel like bread that's been left out overnight, dry at the edges, stiff in the middle, and somehow both cold and squishy in the wrong places. You stretch. Something cracks. It might be your dignity. You rub your eyes and glance around. Other guards are beginning to stir, scratching, groaning, swearing under their breath. One man sits up and immediately pulls a spoon from under his tunic. No one questions it. And you realize something. They're all as miserable as you. No one here is sleeping like a soldier. They're sleeping like people who are cold, underfed, and slightly afraid of rats. There is no ancient soldier's wisdom passed down from generation to generation about the art of slumber. There is only exhaustion, a shared blanket lottery, and the unspoken agreement not to ask too many questions about night sounds. So tonight, when you try again, you won't lie flat like a statue or curl up like a prayer. You'll just sleep like a human, doing their best under layers of wool, straw, and vague existential confusion. It's not poetic, but it might actually work. You're pretty sure the kitchen boy has it out for you. It's not the way he eyes your boots like he's guessing your size, or the way he always seems to be drying the same mug for 20 minutes whenever you walk in. It's the way he gives you advice too helpful, too casual, like he's actively trying not to smirk while setting you up for disaster. This time, he's hunched over a pot of something that smells like boiled regret and onion peels when he drops it. Hot rocks, he says, like it's a password. Wrap one in cloth. Sleep like a lord. You nod like a man who understands ancient secrets, then immediately prove you don't by sprinting outside and grabbing the first stone you can find. It's big, lumpy, and perfectly round in a way that suggests destiny. You hold it up to the kitchen fire with the reverence of someone lighting a sacred relic, rotating it carefully until it radiates menace. There is no cloth. Well, there is, but it's currently serving as your pillow, and you've already made peace with the straw poking through it like judgment. You briefly consider your sock, then remember what happened the last time you took it off in public. There are still whispers. You settle for wrapping the rock in what you believe is a spare food rag, which turns out to be cheesecloth. It goes about as well as expected. Back in the barracks, you lower yourself onto your pile of bedding like a wizard about to test a dangerous new spell. You place the glowing rock in the hollow of your tunic, right against your stomach, and wait. For a moment, it is divine. A wave of warmth seeps into your ribs like the embrace of a fire god with boundary issues. Your teeth unclench, your shoulders loosen. You whisper, "Blessed be," and close your eyes, imagining a future where you teach other guards the sacred art of midnight warmth. They'll build statues, they'll sing songs. You'll be known across the kingdom as the first of heat. Then the rock shifts. You don't scream, because that would wake the others, and even in agony, you crave their respect more than your own safety. But your legs spasm violently, your back arches, and your mouth makes a noise that could be transcribed as guch rnng. The cloth is gone, vaporized. Or maybe it never existed, and the gods are laughing. The rock has turned against you, branding its angry sigil into your flesh with all the tenderness of a blacksmith late for dinner. You try to throw it aside with dignity, but dignity has left the building. What actually happens is you flail, knock over your sleeping neighbor's helmet, and fling the rock directly into your own blanket pile, where it promptly catches a corner of it on fire. Not dramatically, just enough to smolder and emit that specific cursed smell of singed wool and shame. Now you're shirtless, sweating, half burnt, and patting out a smoking patch on your only blanket. The night is quiet again, except for the occasional rustle as others shift away from you slightly, just in case whatever cursed energy you've summoned is contagious. You lie there, wide-eyed, chest still radiating from the encounter, and whisper a quiet vow never to trust the kitchen boy again. Somewhere, the rock glows softly in the corner like it too is smug, and yet, for those brief, glorious 47 seconds, you were warm, truly, deliciously warm. It wasn't a fire. It wasn't layers. It was portable, private, almost luxurious warmth that lived right against your skin. Even now, with the burn mark beginning to form in the shape of something that might become a conversation piece, you think, maybe tomorrow, maybe with thicker cloth, maybe hot rocks just need understanding, a little finesse, and possibly a barrier of 3 tunics and a prayer to Saint Bernsalod. Because deep down, even as you shift uncomfortably and try to find a new position that doesn't touch the tender spot. You know one thing: it was still worth it. The stairs to the crypt moan louder than you do, which is impressive considering you've pulled something in your lower back from carrying a bundle of firewood shaped suspiciously like betrayal. You're told the night shift down there is quiet, with a tone that suggests either comfort or curses. You've stopped caring. At this point, if they assigned you to sleep in the moat, you'd ask for a pillow and try not to swallow frogs. The first step into the crypt sends a chill straight through your boots, your socks, and what remains of your soul. It's not just cold, it's ancestral. Ancient cold. A type of chill that feels like it learned from glaciers and then took postgraduate studies in emotional distance. Your breath fogs in front of your face like a slow exorcism. You hold your torch a little tighter, but something's different down here. No shouting, no coughing, no one jostling you out of the way to steal the warm spot near the brazier or throwing dice at your boots. Just stillness. The crypt stretches out before you in dim orange flickers, long rows of stone shelves and slumbering bones. You walk softly without meaning to. It just feels rude to stomp near the eternally sleeping. You find your station a little wooden stool beside an old knight's tomb, a rusted sword etched into the slab above him. Someone's carved a tic-tac-toe grid into the edge. At least one poor soul has stood watch here long enough to lose at it several times. You sit, expecting the cold to seep into your thighs like a second skin, but somehow, it's not as bad as the tower, not worse than the wind. It's dry down here, still. The air doesn't bite so much as hum, low and neutral, like the crypt's decided you're fine and is willing to ignore you as long as you don't cause trouble. You settle in. Your torch hisses gently. Somewhere behind you, a mouse rustles. You don't startle. You don't move. It's the first time in days no one's speaking to you, or about you, or snoring like they've swallowed a musical goose. You shift your weight, leaning back against the wall. The stone is cold, but stable. It feels reliable, like it won't judge you for having onion breath and an uneven beard. An hour passes, then another. You don't even notice yourself slipping into that half-sleep where dreams and reality blend just enough to make you think the skeleton in the corner might be winking at you. You jerk awake once, but it's not fear. It's more like a soft reset, a nap with boundaries. You exhale through your nose and realize something strange. You feel rested, not warm, not pampered, not nestled in a velvet bed surrounded by tiny bards singing lullabies about your greatness. But for the first time in weeks, your bones aren't vibrating with fatigue and disappointment. There's a calm here, a hush you don't get above ground. You briefly consider that this might be how the dead feel all the time, and for a half second you envy them. No shifts, no blanket lotteries, no one kicking you in their sleep or mistaking you for a pillow with opinions. Just cold peace. When your relief finally arrives late, of course, chewing loudly and unapologetically on a heel of bread, you rise slowly, joints cracking like distant thunder. You nod to the crypt, as if it's done you a favor, and it feels right not to speak. You step past the rows of tombs, past the stone arch, back into the castle proper, where everything is louder and smellier and profoundly alive in the worst way. But as you climb the stairs, torch trailing low smoke behind you, one thing settles quietly in your chest. You wouldn't mind being assigned down there again. The dog looks at you like it knows taxes, owns property, and considers you part of the peasantry, which, to be fair, you are, but still. Its eyes are judgmental in a way that feels personal, regal, even. Like it could file a complaint with the king, and it would actually be read. Its fur, however, is the stuff of dreams, thick, golden, probably brushed with a comb carved from unicorn bone, and warm, unfairly warm, unethically warm. You first notice it during one of your routine accidental patrols past the Baron's chamber door. where it lies stretched out in front of a roaring fire, smug as sin and twice as soft. Your cloak has begun to disintegrate at the seams. Your boots have developed holes that function more as suggestions than barriers. And the blanket you were allotted last night was actually a curtain, a damp one. Something inside you snaps. You make a plan. It's not an elaborate plan, it's more of an impulse shaped like a decision. A little midnight cuddle. That's it. A moment of shared survival, two mammals helping each other through the winter night, perhaps forming a quiet alliance forged in body heat and mutual disdain for your employer. You're not looking to kidnap. You just want to borrow, temporarily, for warmth, and maybe affection. If the stars align, you wait until the castle quiets, until the halls hum with that weird nighttime energy where everyone is either asleep or pretending very hard to be. You slip from your post with all the grace of a thief and none of the skill. Your boots betray you with every creak, but you press on. The firelight is still flickering under the Baron's door. Good. The beast is still in residence. You open the door half an inch at a time, breathing only through your nose. No one stirs. No alarm is raised. You see it there curled, content, its belly rising and falling in a rhythm that suggests it dreams of roast, pheasant, and noble contempt. You kneel beside it like a pilgrim approaching something divine. One hand outstretched, trembling, you inch forward. The fur is just as soft as it looked, and as your fingers touch its flank, warmth floods up your arm like a prayer being answered. You whisper, "Hello." The dog opens its eyes. There is a moment of stillness. You both assess each other. You, cold, tired, a shivering skeleton in linen, pretending to be a man. The dog, warm, full, suspicious of your intentions and your lineage. Then it growls. It's not a bark. It's a warning from deep within its soul, a sound that says, "I was bred to guard silk pillows and disembowel intruders. Guess which one you are." You freeze, and then the dog moves. What follows is a blur of fur, teeth, and the realization that this was perhaps not your most well-thought-out idea. You don't scream "there's no time," but your exit from the chamber is best described as urgent. The dog doesn't chase you beyond the threshold. It doesn't need to. You've been marked, spiritually, emotionally, and, yes, physically. There's a rip in your sleeve now, and it smells vaguely of roasted venison and superiority. And then you hear it. The throat clear of the guard captain. You spin around, blood racing, mind scrambling for any lie that doesn't sound exactly like the truth. He raises one eyebrow, the kind of expression that says, "I've seen worse, but not by much." You attempt dignity. You fail. The captain says nothing. He gestures toward the stairs, back toward the barracks, toward your bed of straw and betrayal. You nod. The walk back is long. Your sleeve flaps in the breeze like a banner of shame. Your arms ache with cold. Your soul aches with what could have been. And the Baron's dog, you're sure, is already asleep again, dreaming of your humiliation. But for those 3 seconds, those glorious, firelit seconds, you were warm. And that, somehow, makes it all feel worth it. At first it feels like a brilliant solution. Revolutionary, even. You and Edric, whose qualifications for being a guard mostly include owning a spear and never blinking, agree to invent what you later call the sleep rotation protocol. It's not official. But then again, neither are most things here. The rules are more like folk songs. Everyone knows them. No one follows them exactly. And half of them involve turnips. The plan is simple. One of you watches, the other dozes. Half the misery, double the efficiency. Maybe even some dreams that aren't about frostbite and your feet falling off like overripe plums. The first shift, you volunteer to stay up. Heroic, noble. You pace the ramparts while Edric curls into the fetal position like a man who's been practicing it since birth. He doesn't even try to look awake. He just sighs with the relief of someone who has never taken responsibility seriously and never intends to. You guard the wall like it might sprout legs and run off. The torch sputters. The wind whistles threats through the arrow slits. You make up lyrics to a song about stew that you hum under your breath like a lullaby for the void. Time slips. Your toes stop reporting status updates. You may or may not hallucinate a snowman giving you life advice. But you do it. You make it. 2 full hours. Now it's your turn. You gently nudge Edric. He does not respond. You poke harder. He mumbles something that might be a curse or a recipe. You whisper that it's time, that it's your legally binding moment of peace. He nods vaguely, rolls over, and begins to snore in a way that suggests his soul has left his body. You give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he's warming up. You wait. 5 minutes. 10. 27. Your eyes begin to cross. You attempt a wall lean, but the stone feels especially judgmental tonight. Your knees mutiny. You nudge Edric again, this time with a boot, a gentle one. Encouraging. He snorts, opens one eye, and says, "What?" You remind him. He grunts. "Right. Yeah. Soon." He does not move. You consider your options. Shouting would wake the captain. Punching would get you reassigned to latrine duty. And Edric is somehow heavier than your will to live, so dragging is out. Your man stuck. Betrayed in the worst way possible, by an agreement made without parchment. You pass the rest of the night awake, staring at Edric's back, like you're trying to set it on fire with your mind. You draft entire manifestos in your head, filled with clauses and subclauses about equitable sleeping rights. You imagine a world where justice is real and naps are sacred. By dawn, you are vibrating. Not from anger, your body no longer has energy for that, but from the sheer chill that now lives in your bones like an unwanted tenant. You've named it Colin. It's not leaving. Edric finally stirs, just as the sky begins to blush with morning. He stretches with the self-satisfaction of a man who has committed a minor crime and gotten away with it. He yawns directly in your face. He says, "That was a good system. We should do it again." You stare. Words fail. He slaps your back with the camaraderie of someone who believes friendship is immune to betrayal. "Next time you get the first nap," he promises, as though that balances the cosmic scale. Then he strolls off in the direction of breakfast, humming a little tune you're fairly certain he stole from your stew song. You don't follow. Not immediately. You just stand there, watching the horizon like something better might arrive on it. Like justice might ride in on a horse made of fire and warm socks. It doesn't, but you do begin to quietly, calmly, plan. Not loud revenge, not the dramatic, chaotic kind, the slow kind. The kind that takes place over weeks, one forgotten chore at a time. The kind where you eat the last piece of bread and say nothing. Where you, accidentally, swap his boots for ones half a size too small. Where you replace his torch oil with pig fat so the flame flickers like a drunk moth. You will have your turn, and when you do, you're going to sleep the sleep of someone who waited, who suffered, and who will absolutely not be waking up early for anyone. You stumble across it by accident. At first, you think it's just a rumor like the fire room or competent leadership. But then it happens. One night, after your shift ends and your bones are humming with cold like an untuned lute, you drag yourself toward the main hall, following the scent of something that isn't frozen turnip stew. You're not even sure what you're looking for. Maybe sleep, maybe revenge. Maybe a hole in the floor you can crawl into and declare sovereign land. Instead, you find warmth. Not metaphorical warmth, not the fleeting glow of a memory reel. Actual warmth, curling up from a dented copper pot and rising like the breath of a forgiving God. You're inside the scullery, having taken the long way around on purpose, and someone benevolent, possibly mythical, hands you a wooden bowl without speaking. Inside the bowl, soup. Not much of it. Not festival soup. Not your name day soup. This is broth so thin you can see your shame in the reflection. But it's hot, and it's yours. You don't ask questions. You grip it like treasure and let the steam lick your cheeks. It smells like garlic, maybe onion, and something suspiciously like optimism. You huddle near the wall and sip. The warmth doesn't go deep, but it hits your fingers, and suddenly they start to forgive you. The feeling in your knuckles returns. You nearly cry, but you're too dehydrated. The kitchen boy, no older than your belt, eyes you with mild disapproval but says nothing. He's seen worse. You, perhaps. Last week, the next night, you time it again. You take the scenic route after your shift, humming casually as if you've always patrolled through the pantry. The kitchen is mostly empty, just a few lingering clatters and a blur of aprons. You pause like someone who might be lost. You are not lost. The same boy squints at you, then hands you another bowl. This one has a potato chunk, a whole one. That's when you know. There's a system, an unspoken ritual. A sacred window that opens briefly between third watch and second breakfast when the kitchen fire's still hot and someone's ladling the leftovers into not quite clean bowls. It's not advertised. It's not officially sanctioned, but it's there, hidden behind the greasy curtains of castle routine like a secret spell only the desperate know how to cast. You learn the signs. The scrape of the iron pot against the hearth, the way the wind smells different near the corridor at just the right time, the boy humming the same cursed tavern tune that's been passed down through 13 generations of mediocre bards. You adapt your schedule, you adjust your stride, you guard the kitchen now. Not officially, of course. You still wave your spear at shadows, still squint at the battlements like you're solving tactical puzzles and not thinking about root vegetables. But you position yourself with intention. Your rounds become loops. You develop a complex theory about defending the storeroom from invisible thieves. You invent a report called Logistical Proximity Strategy. No one reads it. You get broth 4 nights in a row. You stop waking up with frostbitten hands. You start believing in joy again, or at least in not dying before breakfast. On the 5th night, you show up a minute too late. The pot is empty. The boy shrugs with the indifference of a minor deity. He hands you a single crouton. It's cold. Your soul leaves your body for a moment. But now you understand the stakes. The soup schedule is real. The soup schedule is ruthless. And like all powerful things in the castle, it operates without mercy. There is no second ladling. There is no backup broth. You carve the timing into your mind like runes. From then on, you are punctual. You perfect the art of the slow patrol. You pace the hallway like a wolf with an internal sundial, counting your steps and aligning your arrival with astronomical precision. When the kitchen door creaks, you are there. When the bowl appears, your hands are ready. It becomes your private religion. You whisper thanks to the soup gods. You start rating the batches. Tuesday's broth was courageous. Thursday's was a liquid apology. Sunday's tasted like someone stirred it with a boot, but a warm boot. And that's what matters. You do not speak of the schedule. Not to Edric. Not to the captain. Not to the baker's wife who definitely knows and is definitely testing you. This is sacred knowledge. This is warmth earned. This is the closest thing to luxury a freezing guard can know. You don't ask for seconds. You just savor what you're given. And when you finally return to your corner of straw and sorrow, your hands are warm, and that, for now, is enough. The socks hang like limp ghosts above the forge, stiff with yesterday's dampness and this morning's cruel joke of a breeze. You're not even sure why you tried to wash them. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was fungus. Probably both. The point is, they're clean now, in theory. Frozen, solid, but clean. You crouch near the forge, teeth rattling like dice in your mouth, and eye the glowing coals like a man trying to bargain with a small dragon. The blacksmith has gone off somewhere arguing with an anvil, or seducing a barrel of mead, so technically you are trespassing. But technically, so is winter, and you've had enough. You inch the socks closer. Just a bit. A touch of warmth, a flirtation with fire. They start to soften. A curl of steam rises. You imagine your toes slipping into something not catastrophic. You dare to dream of flexibility. Then the left sock hisses like a demon being baptized and curls in on itself like a cinnamon roll made of suffering. You snatch it back, shaking it like a guilty thief, and stare at the newly scorched toe. It's blackened, crisp, smells faintly of betrayal and sheep. Still, it's drier than it was. The right sock fares slightly better. You hold it farther from the flames this time, rotating it like a spit-roasted turkey, whispering apologies to whatever gods preside over knitwear. A blister bubbles up near the heel. You ignore it. You're a soldier. You've eaten worse. Eventually, they're both warm. Not dry, exactly. And not what anyone would call comfortable, unless their frame of reference is medieval punishment devices. But warm, and in this moment, that feels like victory. You sit on a crate, pry your feet out of the rags you've been calling socks for 3 weeks, and attempt the maneuver. The left sock fights you. It's stiff again, cooling quickly in the morning air like a sad clay sculpture of footwear. You wedge your foot in anyway. It makes a sound no sock should make. Somewhere between a squelch and a whimper, the right sock slips on easier, thanks to whatever black magic lives inside the forge. Your toes twitch in surprise. They haven't felt this level of stimulation since you accidentally dropped that hot rock on them during the heat stone incident. You stand. The warmth lasts 17 seconds, 20, if you count the lingering illusion of circulation. But still, it's something. A heartbeat of comfort, a fleeting moment where your feet don't feel like cursed icicles from a witch's pantry. You strut out of the smithy with the swagger of someone who has touched luxury. Your gait is uneven, because the scorched part of the sock is now fused to your toe, but it's a noble limp, a victorious hobble. Outside, Edric sees you and snorts. You smell like burnt wool and desperation. You nod solemnly. I feel like a king. He shakes his head, mutters something about madness, and goes back to whatever he does between naps and lies. You ignore him. He doesn't understand the sacred ritual you've endured. The trial by fire, the holy thawing. You keep walking. Each step is a strange mix of pain, pride, and the faintest squish where the fabric didn't quite finish drying. It's like wading through warm disappointment. But it's your warm disappointment, and that's what matters. Later, when your shift begins and the wind licks your ankles like an overly familiar ghost, you will miss this. You will long for the brief companionship of semi-heated socks and the illusion that you are in control of your life. But for now, you are triumphant. For now, your feet are warm. And in the endless, frigid theater of castle guard duty, that's practically a standing ovation. The meeting takes place in the cellar, which is cold, damp, and smells vaguely of salted despair. 6 guards sit on overturned barrels, and one very nervous-looking chicken coop. No one makes eye contact. Everyone holds a mug, though only 2 contain anything drinkable. The rest are ceremonial, or perhaps just deeply wishful. You're here because someone called it a blanket meeting, and your ears perked up like a starving dog hearing the word gravy. A chance, perhaps, to shift the balance of textile power, to move up in the wool food chain, to finally be done with the tattered rag you've been wrapping around your shoulders like a cursed cape from a children's play about sadness. Arnold, who smells like damp bread and speaks like a man narrating his own thoughts aloud, calls the meeting to order by banging a ladle against the side of his mug. It makes a thud more than a clang, but the gesture is enough. The council begins. Item 1, he says solemnly, blanket redistribution protocol. This is met with several grunts, 1 yawn, and a groan that might have come from the wall. I propose, Arnold continues, chest puffed slightly with the fragile authority of a man holding a list, that we rotate blanket assignments on a weekly basis, allowing for equitable circulation of warmth. Godric immediately objects. Of course he does. Godric sleeps under something that might actually be a bear. Not a bearskin, a bear. He refers to it as Olga, and no one is entirely sure if it's a nickname or a warning. "I'll die before I give up, Olga," Godric says, clutching his mug like it contains hot pride. "She's earned her place. She's a blanket," Arnold mutters. "She's a companion," Godric counters, eyes narrowing. You take notes, not because you're a scribe, but because power requires knowledge, and knowledge requires receipts. You underline Olga twice and draw a small bear next to it. The discussion veers wildly from logistical theory to personal vendettas. Edric accuses Tomas of hiding an extra fleece in the rafter above his bunk. Tomas says it's not a fleece, it's a memento. No one knows what that means. You write it down anyway, just in case. Someone proposes a blanket-sharing rotation. Someone else points out that no one wants to be the little spoon to Jeff, who apparently sleeps like a starfish and emits the heat of a disappointed candle. The room agrees. Jeff shrugs. A suggestion arises to appeal directly to the steward for additional textiles. This is quickly dismissed as heresy. The steward has the empathy of a moldy cupboard and once referred to cold as a character builder. Arnold writes, "Steward lost cause in the margins of his minutes and moves on." Godric offers to host a competition for blanket rights, a wrestling match, perhaps, or a riddle contest. There is a brief moment where this gains traction. You quietly position yourself behind the barrel, in case it escalates. But the idea collapses when Leoric remembers he has gout and refuses to participate in any plan that involves sudden movements. By the hour mark, you've learned several things. 1. Godric is never giving up Olga. 2. Tomas is absolutely hoarding fleece. 3. The blanket situation is, and will remain, a lawless wasteland governed by hoots and tradition. There is no vote. There is no resolution. Arnold scribbles something vague like, "discussion ongoing," and the meeting adjourns. With the dull finality of a boot hitting mud, everyone disperses, grumbling and stretching and pretending like the talk mattered. But you don't leave empty-handed. You've got names, patterns, alliances. You know who folds their blanket, who rolls it, who hides it under hay like it's the last relic of comfort in this god-forsaken stone tomb. You know who barters, who bluffs, and who quietly stitches their own upgrades under cover of night. There's power in this, future plans to be made, perhaps even a redistribution scheme of your own one involving misdirection, accidental laundry mixing, and a very sleepy Tomas. The blanket war rages on, but you are no longer a foot soldier. You are an intelligence officer, and winter has met its match. The fire crackles like applause, and for a moment, you think the gods are finally paying attention. Maybe it was the 3 near frostbite incidents. Maybe it was the toe you named and lost. Whatever it was, someone up the hierarchy, or perhaps just the universe in a moment of distracted kindness, has granted you a room with an actual fireplace. You don't remember being assigned to it. You don't ask questions. You simply enter, close the door gently behind you, and stare at the low, flickering flames like they might vanish if you blink too hard. The room smells faintly of old herbs and forgotten books, and the cot, while humble, has something suspiciously close to a mattress. A soft one, not a glorified sack of turnips like you're used to. You peel off your layers, one by one, like an archaeologist uncovering the ruin of a man. Beneath 7 tunics, a jerkin, and something that used to be a curtain, you rediscover your own limbs. Your legs actually bend. Your spine makes sounds. You lie down and immediately suspect witchcraft. The blanket, yes, there's a blanket covers you entirely. No elbows left to the elements. No toes dangling in despair. You weep. Not out loud, of course. You're still a soldier. But the tears sit politely at the corners of your eyes, waiting for permission. The fire holds. The mattress does not stab you. The air doesn't chew on your ears. You experience something bordering on bliss. Your body, long convinced comfort was a myth told to misbehaving squires, doesn't know how to respond. Muscles unclench, your jaw relaxes. For the first time in weeks, you don't fall asleep. You drift, float, slide into unconsciousness like a warm spoon into a bowl of soup. You wake up with the sun gently nudging your cheek instead of a horn, a shout, or someone's boot to the ribs. You stretch, you hum, you consider writing a poem. Your joints feel less like old hinges and more like actual joints. You smile, and it feels unfamiliar. Then comes the knock. 3 quick taps, followed by the squeal of a door you didn't even lock, because who locks heaven? It's the captain, of course, face like carved meat, eyes like overcast mornings. He looks around your room as if personally offended by the lack of suffering. "Enjoying yourself?" he asks, and your body betrays you by nodding before your brain catches up. "Good," he says, like a villain announcing the end of a dream. You're reassigned. Your mouth makes shapes. They aren't words. They're sounds of protest wrapped in disbelief, sprinkled with sleep-crushed despair. "Outer wall," he adds, tossing a scrap of parchment at you. "Tonight. Midnight rotation." You want to ask why. You want to remind him of your time served, your loyalty, the way you only screamed once during the frostbite incident of 2 fortnights ago. But he's already gone, vanished down the hallway like some doom-bearing fog. You sit there a moment longer. The fire pops, the bed sighs. You look around at everything you didn't even get to appreciate properly. You'd planned on sweeping, maybe organizing a sock drawer. You don't even own a sock drawer. You'd planned on calling this place home for at least 3 days. Instead, you stand, you dress, you take one last look at the fire. Then, with the tenderness of a monk parting from a holy relic, you blow it out. That night, you're back on the wall, wind in your teeth, darkness as your blanket. Your toes are already writing hate mail to your shins. You wonder if maybe it was all a test, a punishment, a prank from the gods. But somewhere, deep under the layers of wool, you carry the memory of that room, the fire, the cot, the blanket that didn't smell like wet goat, and you swear to yourself, by all that is miserable and mildly flammable, you will find that room again, even if it means spooning a helmet. Again, you dream of quilts. Not just any quilts, luxurious, mythical things woven from clouds and kindness. One is blue, with golden threading that smells faintly of honey and fireplace. Another is plaid, thick and weighty, like a hug from a long-lost aunt who never asked uncomfortable questions. In the dream, someone brushes your hair, which is odd, because you haven't had a proper brushing since you fell asleep against a broom last harvest's eve. Their hands are warm. They hum a tune you don't recognize but instantly love. It smells like cinnamon. There is bread. Then, the bread is gone. So is the humming, and someone is yelling, loudly. You wake with a snowflake melting on your upper lip and the distinct feeling that your dreams have filed a complaint against reality. Cold air slaps your cheeks like a disapproving nun. You're lying on your side in the snow, and the pillow you mistook for a feather-stuffed marvel is, in fact, your own arm, now numb and emotionally distant. Someone is shouting about goblins, possibly 2 people. Maybe one very passionate person with a lot of enthusiasm and 0 evidence. You sit up, bones making sounds that should be set to music. The snow has dusted your cloak, your boots, and, inexplicably, the inside of your shirt. You are cold in ways that feel personal. The yelling continues. It's not near you, exactly, but in the way of things yelled in castles, it echoes into every available crevice. Goblins! Someone shrieks again, and there's a crunch of boots followed by the unmistakable clang of someone trying to draw a sword too quickly and slapping themselves in the knee. You consider staying in the snow. It has, in a way, become your bed. It is unkind, yes, but honest. You shift slightly and dislodge a pine cone. The pine cone, somehow warmer than your body, rolls away in silent apology. You rise, slowly, heroically, if anyone were watching, which they're not. Your dream of quilts dissolves fully now, replaced by the reality of frigid air, sore limbs, and your scarf, which has twisted itself into a noose of betrayal. You stagger toward the noise, because curiosity is stronger than common sense, and also because the goblin yeller might be your next shift relief, and if they're dead, you'll have to work longer. You find the source in the courtyard, two young squires, one pointing dramatically at a perfectly ordinary bush. The other holds a torch, like it's both a weapon and a deeply personal responsibility. It moved, the first insists. I swear it moved. The bush does not move. You squint at it, hoping to see some sign of intelligence or menace. Instead, a small bird hops out and looks personally offended. The squire lowers his arm, sheepish. The other sighs, mutters something about another night wasted, and trudges off in the direction of the kitchens, likely to warm himself with soup or lies. You stand there a moment longer, your breath fogging in the air like soft ghosts. You think about the dream again. The hair brushing, the quilts, the warm hand that touched your forehead, like you were someone worth comforting. You look down at your hands, cracked and red, and briefly wish you'd stayed asleep just a little longer. Maybe you'd have gotten to the part with the cinnamon rolls. Maybe you'd have seen who was humming. But no, here you are, a grown adult shivering in the dark because a shrub rustled and someone's imagination was too well fed. A bell tolls in the distance, soft and hollow. A change of shift. You start walking, boots crunching on snow, the cold trying to sneak past every seam and stitch. You tighten your scarf, which at least pretends to help, and trudge onward. Tonight, you won't dream of quilts. You'll dream of coats, wool-lined ones, with buttons, maybe a hat, maybe someone who knows how to make stew that doesn't taste like boiled broom handle. But you know, deep down, you'll still wake up with a snowflake on your face and a squire yelling about imaginary monsters. And somehow, that's become comforting, familiar even, which is probably a sign of madness. But what isn't, these days? The scribe is not what you'd call approachable. He doesn't speak so much as mutter, and when he walks, it's with the nervous energy of someone who's been scolded by 3 different abbots before breakfast. His ink-stained fingers twitch like he's always on the verge of writing something down, and his gaze flicks around the room as if the walls are misbehaving, and he's the only one keeping notes. He also smells faintly of cloves and candle wax, which, compared to most guards, makes him a luxury. You meet him properly during a particularly cruel draft in the eastern corridor. You're hunched near a stack of old crates pretending they're windproof. He's seated beside a small brazier, humming something that might be a hymn or just his way of telling the cold to get lost. He's got a blanket around his shoulders, a real one, thick, woolen, possibly enchanted. You stare at it longer than is socially acceptable, he notices. Of course he does. You try to look away, pretend you were studying the cracks in the wall, or maybe reconsidering the theological implications of your current suffering, but it's too late. He speaks. Would you care to share in the warmth, brave icicle? His voice is quieter than expected, but there's a smile in it. You nod, trying not to look desperate, and shuffle closer with the grace of someone whose joints have fused into cold-resistant disappointment. He lifts a corner of the blanket with ceremonial flourish, as if inviting you into a secret society. You slide under and immediately experience a sensation so divine you almost weep. Your spine releases a single cautious pop. Your toes remember life. In exchange, you offer conversation, which is regrettable. The scribe listens with the expression of someone politely enduring a child's puppet show. Then, when you pause, he sighs and says, "Would you like to hear a stanza about despair and frostbite?" You say yes, because obviously, he recites a verse so dramatic, so florid, it makes the icicles weep in solidarity. You're not sure what half the words mean, but the cadence is nice, and he really sells it with his eyebrows. Then he looks at you expectantly, as if you too might be harboring original compositions. You panic and offer a haiku about your left foot falling asleep. It goes, cold foot, traitor limb, wanders off in frozen dreams, returns with silence. There is a pause, then he claps, not mockingly, not enthusiastically either, but with the slow appreciation of a man who has been locked in a tower full of boring people and has just discovered someone weird enough to be interesting. This becomes a thing. You show up near the brazier when your shift ends, shivering and semi-coherent. He lifts the blanket. You trade bad poetry for body heat. Sometimes he critiques your metaphors. Once he makes you rewrite an entire haiku, because snow does not shimmer with vengeance, it shimmers with indifference. You accept this because he has 2 whole blankets, and you are a man of flexible principles. One night, you bring him a boiled turnip. It's lukewarm and shaped like despair. He eats it anyway. In return, he lets you borrow one of his scrolls. You can't read most of it, but the parts you can are about the stars and how no one can touch them. But people try anyway. You stare at that line for a long time. The blanket smells like rosemary and old stories. The scribe tells you he once wanted to be a knight. You tell him you once wanted to own boots without holes. Then you both sit in silence and listen to the wind trying to crawl under the door. It's less lonely with 2 people and a terrible haiku between them. When you leave, he presses a folded square of wool into your hands. For your toes, he says, and returns to his humming. You walk away warmer than you've been in weeks, holding the closest thing to a miracle the castle has ever produced. And you think maybe, just maybe, poetry has a purpose after all. You learn it by accident, which is how most ancient wisdom makes its entrance. It's your 3rd night sleeping in a corridor that might have once been a broom closet, but now smells like pickled onions and regret. You've given up on the blanket lottery, on warm stew, even on socks that don't feel like icy paperweights taped to your ankles. Tonight, you're chasing the mythical creature known as sleep, with the desperation of a bard in debt. You try lying flat. Your spine protests. You try curling into a fetal position. Your knees freeze instantly. You try leaning upright against the wall again, but your neck audibly threatens to disown you. Eventually, you end up somewhere between collapse and revelation. You curl to your left, tucking your right knee toward your chest, not fully, just enough to keep circulation ambitious. Your sword, which has long ceased to be a weapon and now functions mainly as a cold metal bedfellow, rests beneath your chin like a bizarre emotional support animal. Your threadbare cloak pulls up over your nose, which has gone full icicle again, and you squeeze your eyes shut in the sort of prayer that's less about faith and more about survival. And then something strange happens. Your body doesn't scream. It doesn't necessarily relax, but it stops listing grievances. Your joints align in temporary ceasefire. Your breath fogs softly against the edge of your cloak, and your feet stop audibly plotting to leave you for a warmer host. You hover somewhere just south of consciousness, where thoughts melt into each other like half-frozen stew. You have found it, the guard curl. You don't name it at first. You assume this pose is yours, discovered through perseverance and the quiet madness of sleep deprivation. But then, the next night, you catch a glimpse of old Tam, who's been in the watch for longer than most tapestries have hung slumped on a bench in that same precise position. Left side, right knee up, cloak like a mask, hilt cradled like a teddy bear made of steel and disappointment. You watch him snore quietly, the picture of peaceful misery. A few nights later, you pass the armory and see 2 junior guards curled the same way on opposite ends of a bench, mirroring each other like sad gargoyles napping between shifts. No one taught them. They just knew. It's instinctive, primordial, like salmon swimming upstream or noblemen lying about taxes. Soon, it becomes something unspoken between you all. You start noticing tiny variations. Some curl tighter, some let the sword rest across their lap like a loyal pet, but the core formula remains unchanged. You begin to believe it's etched in the bones of every man and woman who's ever stood cold watch over stone walls. You begin to wonder if it's the only thing keeping civilization from crumbling into snowdrifts. You start calling it the guard curl, with an air of reverence. You whisper it like a sacred rite. A younger recruit tries to sleep face down one night and throws his back out. You don't say, "I told you so," but you do nod solemnly as you demonstrate the form. His eyes widen. He understands. No words necessary. Even the captain who once claimed real soldiers sleep upright and dream only of duty is caught in the curl during a particularly brutal frost. You don't comment on it. You just nod in passing. He returns the nod. A silent pact is forged, and for those few precious hours before the bell tolls and the wind comes back with a vendetta, you find a kind of solace. Not comfort, exactly, but a rhythm, a posture that says, "I am cold, I am tired, but I am not entirely defeated." The guard curl doesn't fix everything, but it holds you together, warms the parts of you that haven't given up yet. And on nights when even the scribe's poetry can't thaw your spirits, you settle into the pose like an heir to a quiet tradition. It isn't glamorous, it isn't noble, but it is yours. You don't remember how it started, probably because exhaustion does a number on memory, and also because it happened gradually, like mold or camaraderie. One night, you're curled against a cold wall whispering haikus to yourself, and the next, you're sharing body heat with a man named Grant, who smells like pickled cabbage and bad decisions. Grant isn't talkative, which is a blessing. You've learned that silence is the only luxury the barracks can afford. He does, however, snore like a dying goat, and somewhere in the pitch-black realm between midnight and dawn, your elbow finds his ribs with the precision of long practice. There's also a dog now. No one knows where it came from. It's not the Baron's, unless the Baron has started naming his pets Oi and feeding them leftover boots. The dog has patchy fur, one ear that seems to act independently from the rest of its body, and the uncanny ability to find exactly the warmest spot in any room and claim it with the moral certainty of a saint. Tonight, that spot is between your feet, your shiftmate's shoulder, and the dented bottom of a stolen cauldron containing what could generously be called soup. It's more of a liquid memory of soup, a whisper of vegetables, possibly a toe, but no one's checked. You didn't plan this arrangement. You certainly didn't request it. But now the dog growls if anyone tries to move it, and Grant has mastered the art of falling asleep in 47 seconds flat, and you've developed a nightly ritual of propping the cauldron at just the right angle over a stolen ember pilfered from the kitchen hearth. The ember doesn't blaze. It doesn't even glow. It sulks beneath the iron belly of the pot like a tired god who's agreed to bless you with lukewarm air and nothing more. But still, it's heat. Honest to goodness, bone-deep, finger-thawing heat. And when you huddle in close, cloak tucked under chin, boots touching boots, the dog breathing cabbage-scented dreams into your shin, something clicks. Not joy. That would be asking too much. But a sort of resignation that hums with strange, surprising peace. You stop wishing for more. You stop checking the doors to see if someone left a better blanket. You stop dreaming of feather beds or down-filled quilts, or even a decent night's sleep, uninterrupted by the sound of someone's stomach declaring mutiny. Because this, somehow, is enough. It's the scrape of Grant's beard against his jerkin as he shifts in his sleep. The soft thunk of the dog's tail tapping once against the stone floor as you reposition. The scent of scorched soup rising in curls that sting your nose but promise something vaguely edible come morning. You don't speak. You don't need to. There's a rhythm to it now. A sacred choreography of limbs and cloaks and shared exhalations. A balance between proximity and politeness. Even the dog abides by it, lifting a paw only when necessary and otherwise committing fully to the art of radiating warmth like a lumpy furnace with breath that smells like boiled socks. Sometimes you think about the other guards, the ones who scoff at your sleeping pile, the ones with solo bunks and nothing but their pride to keep them company through the night. You hope their pride is warm. You hope it doesn't whimper when kicked in dreams or roll over to steal the last sliver of blanket. In the morning, your knees will ache. Your mouth will taste like old iron and betrayal. The dog will leave mysterious stains on your cloak. Grant will say nothing, as always, but grunt in a way that might mean good night or move your elbow. And you'll rise from the floor, the ember long dead, the soup reduced to a crime scene, and stretch limbs that have forgotten how to function solo. It's not glory, it's not comfort, but it's survival, wrapped in wool and snoring and a three-legged dog named Oi. And somehow, impossibly, it's enough.